On this episode of the Coaches Clinic podcast, man, some like absolute fire.
Yeah, I just appreciate the vulnerability, man. You guys opened up with some of the negative stories that have come a part of your life that turned into positives, and I appreciate hearing those because I've been inspired and hope others will be as well.
I've been inspired by the last 3 or 4 episodes, to be honest with you. Treadway.
Speaking of being inspired, Coach Deegan, undefeated so far this
season.
Yeah. Next week when we record, still undefeated.
Thus.
I mean, we got to hear the ups and downs of the coaching careers of the coaches here on our
staff.
On our staff. Yeah, I couldn't get the word out for whatever.
You're good.
No, I think I'm still emotional from the vulnerability that was shown. So I think that it's going to bring a lot of value to anybody that listens for sure.
Yeah, agreed. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's roll the show. Coaches Clinic podcast. I'm your boy Corey G, brought to you by Max Effort Muscle. We have NSF certified Lemonade Amino Recovery. Check out Treadway if you need more info. I'm your boy Corey G. Our coaching staff: Mike Deegan, Tyler Treadway, Dustin Myers. We're back. We're live. We took a week off. I missed it, Coach.
I know. It feels good to get back in that rhythm.
It does. Treadway, you excited?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I have a lot to talk about today.
I see that because you've been kind of quiet, kind of rolled in, sat down, didn't say a whole bunch. You got the tie-dye on now.
Yeah.
It's like a storm brewing next
It
to
is.
It feels ominous.
The eye of the hurricane.
It does. It does. Well, we've been getting great feedback, and also, like, I think we've actually benefited from this new format of just each having kind of a topic. Like, I know I've learned something every episode, so I think we're going to keep rolling with that. Treadway seems like there is a storm brewing. I think maybe we should start with your topic first, Treadway. What do you got over there?
Yeah, so this is like completely off the topic of why you feel like the storm's brewing, but so my biggest thing on my mind right now is I'm taking over a new soccer program, one that's like very early in their career, I guess. This is only the second year of the program. They don't have an established culture or anything.
You're talking about the club team?
The club team.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So what is your number one, I guess, component or number one piece of advice when you take over a new program or like implement a new system? So for you, maybe G, it's like when you established the 4 a.m. crew, what was the number one thing that you wanted to accomplish, and how did you get that across?
Yeah, mine I think is probably maybe a little bit different, but I think mine was all by being in it, right? So even if you're the first, let's say, week, you're doing the drills with these guys. You're like they show that you're like in and a practitioner, and I don't know that everybody can do that and take this advice, but this is just how I did it, right? I felt like follow me. You know what I'm saying? Like literally follow me, and I'm going to get in there with you. And so you establish like what's it look like when I'm going to take a heavy weight? What's it look like to not make the weight? What's it look like to keep walking in even when you're banged up or this? What's it look like to give, all out on that 100, and I've seen Dustin do this stuff a bunch too. So it's like, for me, I think I had to establish it, but I was younger too, right? And you are, I mean, you're 30, right? So it's like, I think you can still do those type of things. You're a way bigger dude than all these guys too. So it's like, I don't know. I think if there's a way, it doesn't maybe have to be physical, but there's got to be a way that you can put yourself in there so they know you're really about it. If you're trying to really set it up to where it's like there's a standard of like, ooh, okay, this guy's really like in it, like loves it, knows it. Because even if I see you, maybe you're not at top speed, but you got the skill, then I at least know like, oh, okay. When he's coaching me, he understands it. That's my initial advice.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I'm going to agree with that right there. I'm going to say you got to find a way to lead by example so you can kind of help get their buy-in. But I think when thinking of a club team, a high school team, high school coach, when you're in this situation, probably the most important thing is to get that buy-in from the star players right off the bat.
There you go.
You can't really
bang.
You can't underestimate how important that is, because if you go in, you're trying to set the tone, you're trying to establish your culture, and you don't get the buy-in from the leaders right off the bat, you're going to have a hard time getting everyone else, because all those other kids on the team are looking to the leaders to follow. There's a regime change. You got a new guy in here. If you can get those guys, and maybe part of the way to get them is by leading by example, by jumping in, by showing that you're willing to grind with them or whatever.
Think about Vrabel, why people love Vrabel. because he's in there doing push-ups and warm-ups like for the game. He'll check dudes just like he got pads on. That's why people love that dude, in my opinion. That's part of it, right? So I didn't mean to cut you off, Dave. That's part of it though, in the trench.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I had this situation taking over a new program. So what I think about is, and I agree with what these guys are saying too, but I think the first thing you need to do is face reality. And so by facing reality, you go in and you observe. And I think sometimes I look back on what I did wrong. One of them was I made assumptions. I made assumptions that the kids were soft or entitled or whatever. And sometimes that's not the case, especially if you're taking over a situation where it wasn't really good in the past. So sometimes you project negative things on them that aren't necessarily the case. So you go in there, you face reality. You say, okay, what's going well? What's not going so well? And then the second thing is I think you need to create clarity of where this thing's going. So here's where I am right now, and here's where this thing's going, right? And then you start communicating that relentlessly. So it's like, okay, this is where we are today, which is all good. Like we're not so good right now, but watch where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. And then from there, my opinion is rolling the darn sleeves up and trying to win the day in front of you every single day. We talk about today plus a day plus a day is going to equal your future, because a lot of people want to try to project out, right? But no, like if we're going to get there, it starts by us dominating this one in front of us. So I think it's understanding where you are, right? Like, okay, when I started in here, I wasn't very strong or whatever, but that's all good. Like it's cool. This is where I am today. Don't sweat it, because this is where I'm going. Now watch me get there, right? So, and I think that's where what these guys were saying, that's where you can roll your sleeves up with them. But I think it's so important you have a base and knowing where you are. And people skip that step a lot of times. They just want to go up here. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I seen you back squat and you look jacked on the last podcast. I'm feeling you, Coach. It's good. I think great advice. The reality part I think is really important too.
Yeah. Like think about it from a lifting standpoint.
Yeah.
Guys, be like, I'm going to be a 500-pound squatter. Well, you're squatting 250 right now.
Yeah.
And it's all good, right? It's all good. So,
but I
cool.
take the pride in that we can build it to 500.
No doubt, but
Yeah.
you have to understand where you
Sure.
are, right? Because you can't
100%.
come in here and get frustrated because you missed 300, right? You can't. You just go, okay, that's where I am today.
Just not there yet.
It's all good. I'm gonna get 255.
Re-say what you said. The day plus the day. What'd you say?
Today plus the day plus a day is going to equal your future. Because I think we were talking about just off air about with high school athletes a lot of times the inconsistency. Dustin made a great point of that. And everybody wants to be great. Everybody wants to be a state champion. Everybody wants to win a national championship. But the devil's in the details of doing it every single day. Like you can want to do that, like join the club of people who want to do it.
Right.
But if you miss today, then your goals don't align with your reality. You're just hoping that you become good, and hope is not going to get you anywhere.
Join the club of like who actually wants to get better. There's a difference. Dustin, you should explain what you said off air, because I think there's a lot of value in how you explain that.
When we were talking about the high school,
Yeah.
So Treadway was kind of talking about an issue with an athlete that last week was really dialed in, was listening to the podcast, was doing all these things, and then today didn't show up for a workout. And I said, the thing you have to understand with athletes, especially athletes at this age, is that their motivation can be very fleeting. It's very, up and then down, a bunch of highs and lows. So one week they may be dialed in, they may be, logging their meals, they're showing up for all the workouts, they're saying, Coach, what else can I do? What can I do to get better? Then the next week they're sleeping in. That doesn't mean that they still don't have this vision of being great. It's just they haven't discovered the consistency yet. They haven't really learned to value that. And so they need to understand, like you said, it's day plus day plus day. They need to look at that everything over time versus, I did everything right last week. Well, in the scheme of things, if you just do it 1 week at a time here and there, it doesn't really amount to much. It's all about that, kind of the averaging of it. So I think, you talked about being realistic as a coach when you come in and assess the situation. You also have to be realistic and understand, if you are dealing with high school kids or even worse, middle school youth kids, you have to understand they're not operating like adults. They're used to having things done for them. They're used to their parents driving them places.
Yeah.
They're used to being forced to being held accountable. Well, when they got to hold themselves accountable, it's a little bit different.
I'm dealing with that right now as a dad.
We all might be, right?
Yeah.
What you're saying is it just hit me, by the way, and that can be an issue with a lot of youth sports and younger level sports. The adults sometimes expect kids to operate like you are at 25,
Rachel
30,
reminds me
35.
that a lot.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. You didn't think that way when you were 12 or 15. You know what I mean? Like that. If I would have had this, then I would have. Oh boy, that's a little bit. That's a little
Slippery,
shaky, right? Yeah, it's a little slippery.
I had a conversation one time with my dad, and we were talking about Jack and about youth wrestling. He looked at me, he said, "Dust," he goes, "How tough were you at 9 years old?" and I just
Myers.
said, and I just said, "Well, you know the answer to that. I'm going to say it." He said, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That, I remember you telling me that
Yeah.
story, and that's classic your dad. He's
And
like,
he gave me that like lay off my grandson type of thing. You know what I mean? But it was good. I needed to hear that. I needed to be reminded. Like, yeah.
well, and he should remind you that your dad's a really tough dude too, and
Yeah.
he obviously gave you the room, right?
Well, and then he even told me, he said, I wasn't tough at 9 either.
There you
know what I
go.
mean?
And you know
And
what?
my dad's a bad motherfucker.
He
I'm
is
so
a bad, but that's what I'm saying. I agree.
And the other thing too, okay, I'll show some vulnerability and humility too. Like, so sometimes we're not as tough at 43 as we think we
No.
are either. When I was boxing with Dee the one day, he goes, "Hey, you can't just talk about being tough. I mean, I'm like gasping for air, bowing out, right? But
That shit is hard.
if my son or daughter I'd be like, oh, they don't want it bad enough. But
Yeah.
just two weeks ago, I'm over here with my hands on my knees and getting out of a workout.
Hey,
So-
it's hard to want it really bad when you're tired, right?
Yeah,
Fatigue makes all of us into cowards. That's like
For
the famous
sure.
quote, you know?
Right, but I guess it goes back to me though. Sometimes we have unrealistic expectation on others, and that's why I think it does start with holding ourselves accountable to a really high level. So I always give you guys a lot of credit for for me being here, being coached, because it reminds me how hard it can be sometimes. Like when you're being coached, when you're always the one doing the coaching,
Yeah.
it's a good reminder to get checked by somebody else every now and then to say. Because that day I could have, whatever, I got called out, and that's a good thing. And now, and I know how that made me feel, the good and the bad of it,
Yeah,
right? Like
pushes you.
But it reminds you just of just how tough some of this stuff is that we ask kids to do.
Well, and if I think about, like, I'm dealing with mostly adults that don't do it for their living.
That's right.
And so I have to double back on, like, hey, this is my job. And that's also the expectation of people that don't do this, and then they're not going to be. I can't expect exactly. And I'm already half psycho anyway. So like,
well, think about
I
it.
understand that. You know what I mean? So I have to have a high expectation because I want to grow something that's great. But also I have to realize that this guy has a whole nother job. His wife probably doesn't want him getting up. He's still, you know what I mean? Like there's other situations other than I'm going to be an elite fucking lifter. I live this. Like that's me.
That's
and
right.
so I have to remind myself of that often.
It's probably a hard thing to accept, especially with the athletes that you're dealing with. At the end of the day, if one of them decides, I'm never going to lift weights again, their life is not going to change
It's
that
not-
much.
no.
Their
Well-
livelihood's not going to change. Actually, their life might get better. Like you said, their wife's not going to be riding about getting up early or
I
whatever.
think they'll lose that camaraderie of the team that I think, which is part of why they're here, that they don't want to lose. But the reality is it would be easier because they're competing for what? A bowling trophy? But it's really about pushing themselves in life, right?
Yeah.
But the expectation, the craziness, the discipline, and that's kind of, so actually that's kind of my thing I was going to talk about was the personality of your system. Because what I'm starting to realize, and I think I've already known this, but it really became really clear earlier, like we follow what's called the conjugate method, right? And I've got my own version of it, but it's 100% of what you got that day. Well, I'm asking for that 5 times a week from people. Sometimes they want to give you 70%, but you can't give 70% here. It's 100% of whatever that is, right? So it might not be your ultimate, but I need you to take it there. And so when guys are scared, when guys are missing, when they're half in, half out, they're half in the bar, they're half in the gym, that like you can't operate like that with us because of the 100% mentality, because you're going to get fucking hurt or you're just like going to get exposed really bad. So I started to realize, like, why do you think this fucking thing's called max effort? That's the whole mentality, right, around everything, how we operate. Same with Dustin on his cardio workouts. Like, you see it in there, he's dying over there, like, because he's given everything he got. Like, that's the mentality we grew up in. So that's my expectation. So it showcases when you ain't really about that. And I can't hide it because I can see it. So it's one of those things where I started to realize that you can get away with that for a little while, but if you're really not about that, you really can't fuck with me. It's just the fucking truth. I've seen it in the business. I've seen it in the gym. It's just what it is because I wear people out and they fucking give up. And so it's not for everybody. So I realized that most recently too, it's like, this is like a personality thing. You can either adapt or you kind of die. It's what it is. So my question to you guys is, what's the personality of your system that you're displaying for your guys? And you're in, and you can take that however you want, but it's like, is it the details? Is it the effort? Is it a mixture? Like I start to think like mine's probably not super detailed. It's really not. I can tweak the details, but I'm really seeing where's the fucking heart at? Where's the consistency and where's the fucking heart? So it was kind of a topic that came to mind because of some recent situations, but it also reminded me of today of like I need people that are willing to give that 100%, which is the type of training that we do, which is why it's an outcast type of training, because it's difficult. So anyway, anybody can take that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, even though the style of training that I do with my athletes is different than what you do. I mean, there's pieces that are similar or whatever, but
Yeah.
I would say the culture is very similar. Now, my guys might not get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But when they're in the gym or when I'm training with them, it's very effort based. I think Tervel told me one time, he said a lot of strength coaches are 90% science and 10% effort. He said you're 90% effort. Or he said at least what you value.
You're more than 10% science.
Yeah. Maybe
But
I'm like 70-30.
Yeah, but I agree.
But he was making the point of, there's a lot of strength coaches, they value science so much they forget to value effort.
I think that's a huge problem
Yep.
right now.
And so of course I value science and technique, and there has to be structure to it. But the way I look at it is if you have all of those dialed in, but your effort's subpar, then what good is it? So I would rather take someone that can give 100% effort, and maybe our programming, the details is off a little bit. Maybe the science, we don't hold it to as high of a standard as maybe someone else, but I think that we're still going to get more out of it because of our effort.
Well, and I'd like to take pride on that. And I was thinking about this too, because when I studied the conjugate method, it's a Russian method, and then I mixed it with a Bulgarian method. It's like I kept reading the things that Louis would talk about. I could take a guy out of the bar and make him an elite lifter if he had it here. So if he was crazy enough and he would follow it, I could build anybody into elite lifter. I will defend what I do every fucking day because I believe the same thing. Because we're doing it with guys that are 6'7", guys that are 5'5", guys that fucking aren't D1 caliber, guys that are D1 caliber, guys that I didn't get recruited to play shit. And I built myself in, I believe in the system so much that I think if you've got the mentality, but it's not for everybody. It's because of that 100% move. So it's that's kind of what I've been thinking a lot about these things lately. And I can see why people weed themselves out. Treadway.
So I'd like to take this from the opposite of what you asked. You asked what is the personality of what you do as a coach, but I'd like to speak to it from being your athlete,
Okay.
right? So I consider myself Corey's like my coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I am performing for you, I see the standard and I see where you're at, and I see why I bought into the system in the first place,
Okay.
right? Why did I want to come to old school gym and train for Corey at the 4 a.m. crew? It wasn't the 4 a.m. crew at the time. At the time, it was 5 a.m., and then we switched to 4 a.m., which on the surface isn't a huge change, but it is. It's a huge lifestyle shift. But there has to be a level of belief in you and what you're doing and what you're building to make me want to continue to do that.
To get up in the middle of the night.
Right. Right.
I'm glad you finally said it's the middle of the night.
It is. I'm aware.
And I think that from an athlete standpoint, if you had any holes in your logic or in your system or just in you as a person, you wouldn't get the same amount of buy-in and belief in you, because people will see that as a weakness and they'll be like, well, Corey's talking about this, but he's not actually doing this. But I saw you go through injury and all these things that you went through, and to be able to continue to lead at the level that you do and really not present any holes or flaws in your system is what makes me as an athlete want to play for you, essentially.
But I'm still learning though too, because I don't think there's any major holes because we've been filling them in for 20 years, but I still think the improvement is so incremental that can make us elite that I'm always pursuing. That's why Jay Fry was here the other day. That's why I'm going to have Tony come in. I know on one of the lifts we still have some Swiss cheese, right? So I just want to make sure the guys know I'm still pursuing it. I might still believe in the core value of it, but I'm still the incremental tweaks are still, it's always going to be, ever moving. So I appreciate that, but I don't believe that all the way, because I think it's it's there, but it's not oh, I'm done, I can't learn anymore. You know what I'm saying? I don't think I present it that way.
Well, to play devil's advocate to that point, there are a lot of coaches that say this is my system, and you either listen to it or you don't, and you can just go, sit the bench or whatever. But what makes you different is you had Tony come in and you say, okay, Tony, this is my guys. These are their bench setups, whatever. Tell me what you see.
Yep.
And then you take that feedback and then you apply it, right? So you're never married to the same. Your core values are the same.
Yeah.
But you're not always married to the same system. That's why the the Get Stacked changes every month.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
always evolving. And, you know, there's like an old quote that the day that you stop learning, I think Louis might have said something about when you stop learning, you stop evolving, you just die.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So you're always evolving it and changing it for the better of the team. Right? So you're not like, okay, well, this is what I did 15 years ago, and I'm going to continue to do it. Those core principles remain the same because those are your values, but the system's always changing to better us as a team.
That's
and
the
I
plan.
think that's what, like, a lot of coaches miss the point on is they say, well, this is what I know. This is my system. That's like me coaching a soccer team and saying, well, I don't really know the best way to take set pieces, but this coach from over here does, so I'm going to bring him in and help, like, orient a new system for taking set pieces. And that's kind of what you do with bringing in all these guys and continuously learning. And I think a lot of coaches probably, because of their ego, are afraid to do that because they look a little bit more weak because it's like, well, I don't know everything, so I'm going to have somebody else come help me.
Yeah.
But from my standpoint, it's like, well, Corey might not know the best thing for my bench, but he's going to go get this guy who can help me, and then Corey's going to learn it, and then Corey can tweak me
And
and
I can teach
continue.
it.
Yep, exactly.
That's cool. Thanks, Troway. Mike.
What I think when I'm listening just to everybody here, it's I think one it's doing the hard work to know yourself and know what you value, because we talked a lot about effort today, and I'll just throw it on the other end. Like if there's somebody who wants to be 90% science and 10% effort, cool. If that's you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that if that's you, like if that's you to your core, if you're a science nut, you want to do, and you go in there and you put all your passion, energy into that end of it,
Yeah.
and you say it out loud, and you tell people this is what we're all about.
That's your system.
Yes, that's your system,
Yeah.
and then you attract people who want to make your system great. You
That's
know,
true.
but I think you look at like a good example would be like Bill Belichick assistants that move on and become head coaches.
Yeah.
They struggle, right? Like there's not many of those former Bill Belichick guys that go on, and the ones who do well, like a Vrabel, usually own their own behaviors, right? So if someone wants to spin off from you, Corey, and then try to run a gym exactly like you, it probably won't work because, like you said, you're 75% insane.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and if-
yeah,
and
for
if-
sure.
And if you're not,
It might be more.
and if you're not insane and you try to do this, it's probably not
Yeah,
going to
you
work
could-
for them.
no.
So I think one, it's understanding who you are and then leaning into that. And I think one for us, I think a quick story. I won't go into the details too much, but we picked 3 words that we wanted someone else to say about our team this year.
Okay.
Like, so we did a little group thing about this. Like, so if someone were to come watch us play, what would we want them to say about us? And our goal was to have another person say that about us this year. And I'm not going to put it on air in case I don't want to give it away. But
Tell me off air. I want to know.
Someone nailed one of them this week. One of the coaches said, "Hey, coach, you guys play like this." And so you never know how it goes when you tell the team, because guys may roll their eyes or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the weekend, I said, guys, the coolest thing was Coach so-and-so said this, and there was a roar from our bus. Like,
That's cool.
So anyway, I think naming kind of, if I come into your gym, what should I see? As an outsider, what would you want me to see? If I came to watch your soccer team train, like, what would I see? Because a lot of times you put values on the wall and they say things, but they don't actually do them. But if an outside person who didn't know anything about your program came in, what should they say? And I think that's when you kind of start thinking about what kind of system and what you value. So.
Well, I know what the fuck I felt like the first time I went to Westside Barbell, and that's what I'm trying to create. I was uncomfortable.
Yep.
I knew I had to bring my A game, and I knew I couldn't be fucking scared.
And that's probably when you fell in love. And that's probably
It's
when
exactly
you went,
when I doubled down on all of it, because I was like, if I got this, then I'm unstoppable.
My thing is, when I was assistant at Marietta, we had won a national championship in 2006. And that year we went and watched, and so all I knew was Marietta College baseball, and it was winning and success, right? And I go watch Vanderbilt practice in 2007, right before our season.
It was a top program.
Yeah. But it was before Vanderbilt was Vanderbilt, and I went, maybe just like your West Side experience, I went, oh my gosh, like this is how I want to run a program. Like this is what I'm going to do one day. And so, anyways, I thought it was a neat parallel, because the one was winning, but it probably wasn't me, and that was more it, So, anyways, I think when you leaning into that environment that you love, then you attract people who love similar things.
Yeah.
And I think that's when things start opening up.
Well, that reminds me of something that's completely off topic, but sometimes people win in spite of their culture, not because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have thought that you had this great culture at Marietta, but really you were winning because of maybe the players that you had, or maybe the competition was low.
Or it's the other
whatever.
guy's culture.
Yeah, or it just wasn't for me though. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't. When I became the head coach, it wouldn't have worked. If I tried to do that, I think it would have been very insincere. You know what I mean? I don't think that would have been me. But you're right though. You can get results can fool you. Like just getting a result can trick some people sometimes. Is that what you were going with?
Yeah,
Dave?
yeah, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes
I agree
people
with
think
that.
that because they're winning, they're doing everything they're supposed to do. When in reality, they're winning in spite of the fact that they have bad habits or a bad culture or whatever. Doesn't necessarily mean that the causation's not always there.
Sure.
That's why the system to get a certain result, no matter who the person is, that it can incrementally build. That's why I'm really dialing in and been reading more about like that I could pull a guy out of anywhere and say, I can make this motherfucker strong. And I know it undoubtedly. If I come in your system, my baseball is going, my IQ, my skill set, it's going to improve incrementally. Could I then walk on for your team? Probably not. But
Well, let me push on that thread. What if this person doesn't have the it? What if they don't have the effort?
yeah, so that's not going to work then.
Okay,
But I think from a base level talent standpoint,
Right. Oh, no doubt.
That's what I'm more talking about. Now the mentality is something you either have it or you don't, or you can. And I think the thing you said a couple podcasts ago is like you're not. It's not a lifetime sentence to be soft.
Yeah.
It's not a lifetime sentence. I agree with that. But then if it's real deep and that's really what it is, it might not ever leave.
No doubt. They'll probably know it within 2 weeks.
Yes.
If you can't if it can't come out of you in your environment in about 2 weeks, it's probably not going to work, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You're not going to flip it. I mean, it may just not have it, right? And that's.
Yeah.
But I think that's what you said something earlier. People will select out almost if.
No question.
You know what I mean? Like it's not for everybody, and the more louder and prouder you can say that, and in our world, like the transfer portal is such a big thing right now. But people are transferring. Well, sometimes it's all right. Like that, you didn't find the environment for you. I'm not being a proponent of transferring. I'm just saying there are certain times where you're in an environment and it just doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
And this other environment over here might. So. Select out and try to do it because they're not going to last here and they're not going to thrive. Yeah, so.
No. It's it's for anybody but not for everybody.
Yeah.
And Brian Peters said something great about how not everybody can walk in that door, but everybody can walk out of it. I was like, mic drop, Brian is good. Who's next? D?
Go, baby.
Good.
All right, so we're going to shift gears completely then. All right,
Let's go.
Here's the topic I want to talk about today, and I'll explain to you why I want to talk about it. I want to talk about hurt versus injured. When you're dealing with athletes. Okay, so the reason I want to talk about this, there's a big controversy in the college wrestling world right now.
Okay.
So we just had the Big Ten championships this past weekend. Now the Big Ten is hands down the toughest conference in the country.
Like no question.
No question. It's not even close. I can't remember. Maybe it's like 7 of the top 10 teams in the country from the Big Ten, whatever it is.
Okay.
So the way that Division I NCAA is set up, there's no regionals or anything like that. You qualify based on your conference tournament, and they allocate the amount of qualifying spots to your NCAA weight class based on how tough the conference is. So maybe in the MAC, you might have to win your conference or be top 2 or whatever. And certain weight class in the Big Ten, there was one weight class that qualified all 14.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? They had automatic, so whatever. So anyway, so the Big Ten, even though it's very important and very prestigious, in essence, it's the qualifying tournament for the NCAAs. Well, we had a monumental number of medical forfeits at the NCAAs because once you've qualified, if you're 5th or you're 6th, does not affect your seeding criteria for NCAAs. So in its essence, there's no difference, all right, whether you place 5th or 6th. So I can't even remember the number of matches. It was something like 35% of the medal matches were medical forfeits. And Iowa, who's known for being the toughest, even like you don't know a lot about wrestling,
but I know
Iowa's tough.
Yeah.
They had 2 guys in the finals that forfeited.
And didn't even wrestle.
Now, this is on primetime TV, all right?
Bad for the sport.
So they're giving up a Big Ten title.
Giving up a Big Ten title, which,
wow.
like, now one of them had to wrestle Gable, the heavyweight Olympic champ. He wasn't going to win anyway, but where do you draw the line of like, hey, you're maybe a little bit banged up, maybe your elbow hurts, but you're not injured. You got to wrestle this match. You're on national TV. This is a bad look for people are tuning in to watch Gable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not gonna give him a match. Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of what the big discussion in the wrestling world is about. Like, hey, there's some guys that are legitimately injured. Maybe they made it to the semis, then they defaulted out 3 matches in a row to playing 6, just so they would. And you could tell they're in there with one shoulder taped up or whatever. But some of these guys, like, yeah, they're probably a little bit dinged up, but could they compete if they had to, if the qualifying spot was on the line? Well, yeah, of course. But they chose not to. They're trying to save it for 2 weeks from now. So within your individual, when you're in the club soccer world or the high school world or even the college baseball world, or when you got guys, maybe coming in, there's a meet, it's 8 weeks away. It's a long way away. How do you deal with a guy and kind of assess, like, all right, are they injured or are they just hurt and don't really feel like giving their all today, or they don't want to compete? Treadway, why don't you start us off?
So soccer is a little different because they all seem like they're always banged up.
Those guys are so dramatic too. I
Yeah.
swear the ones I see on TV, like on YouTube, are hilarious.
Every
Yeah.
time they fall, it's hands over
They
the
look like they're
face.
gonna die, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden they run off.
So
That's
there's
stereotype, I know. Sorry.
There's strategy to that in the professional world because it's a continuous running clock, and then you get injury time added to the end of it.
I got it.
So when you're running around for 90 minutes and you don't have a break, they do it to kind of like
I got it.
take a breath, get their composure, whatever. Because it's not like football where you play for 4 seconds and then you take 30 seconds off, whatever. But like my soccer players always come up and say, oh, this is banged up, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, if we had to play for the state championship, would you play today? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay, well then go play. Like,
That's great.
Yeah.
if
That's great.
the answer is no, then all right, cool, you have something going on. Like, I'll sit you out. We had a situation where we had a player who really wanted to play, but he was legitimately injured, and the training staff said that he couldn't play, so we had to hold him out. That was a little bit more tough and a little bit different than what you're asking. But the ability to fight through being hurt is something, when I come in to train with G, whatever, I'm not always feeling 100%. Now, is it the difference between being injured where I can't squat right now, so I just shouldn't because I'm going to derail my life, or am I just hurt and maybe my shoulder hurts, but I can still go through everything? To me, it's a personal thing, and you have to dig deep, right? So if my pride is on the line and I'm battling somebody and it's meet day, and I'm like, okay, it's me or this guy, I'm gonna try and give it everything I have, unless I physically can't. So yeah, that's a tough one because it's like you can't tell somebody else how hurt they are.
So
Yeah,
what do you
it's true.
do? What do you do as a coach though when you suspect? Let's take competition out of it. It's practice. Someone's their ankles bother them, so they don't want to run sprints at the end of practice or whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you deal with a kid that you think is trying to milk it?
If they
Because I get it, it's a fine line. You don't want to be the coach that hurts a kid, and now
Yeah, it's
the
tough.
AD comes down on you, or the parents are mad, or whatever.
So there's legalities in it now too, right? I'm not talking the
Yeah,
Big
yeah,
Ten,
yeah.
bro, but yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, I take them for their word. So if you tell me you're hurt, then that's fine, but you're not going to probably start in the next game or play in the next game. And then you can tell pretty quick if their mood changes. Oh, well, I think I can suffer through. Okay, well, you weren't really injured. You were just kind of
Yeah,
like you didn't want to do it. So,
You put some repercussions on top of it, and that'll kind of give you a gauge for it.
Yeah, so in that sense of the wrestling, like if that coach would have said, okay, well, that's fine. If you're so hurt, like, all right, well, you're not going to be able to wrestle in the NCAA tournament, I bet they probably would have went and wrestled. Now, that's probably a lot different scenario than me telling a kid he's not going to start in a high school soccer game, but that's how I would handle
All
it
relative.
right now. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny to me just as I'm kind of just reflecting on it all. Once you and your question is off of really high level elite athletes. So I think there's a larger problem there in the sport, maybe that they're shooting for the NCAA and they're backing
that's
out.
like a strategy thing. It sounds a lot.
Yeah,
like.
I mean, maybe it's showing that there's something wrong with the system itself, and they need to change that.
agreed.
So I'm not. What I'm going to say isn't necessarily off of that because those are high level cultures.
No, I want to hear about in your culture.
At my level, I'm just saying where I'm going is that once you get your culture at a certain point, that word just sometimes makes me cringe. By the way, because everyone uses it, but I don't sweat it anymore. Guys don't. They don't check out now. If they check out, I'm going to really believe in them. I hate to even use the word, but there's a pressure to practice. There's a pressure to play because there's somebody behind you that will take your spot. The baseball. There's the Wally Pipp story. You guys know Wally Pipp? Of course you don't, right? Wally Pipp got hurt. He got hurt, sat out, and then again Stan Musial and
I know Stan Musial is.
Then he started the streak. It's not Stan Musial. Sorry,
Ted Williams.
Lou Gehrig.
Okay.
Lou Gehrig. So he got hurt and he never plays again. Right. Wally Pipp kind of goes down in history as a guy who bowed out, and another guy goes in and never came out. So my point is, guys don't want to come out. They want to practice. They want to perform. And so when someone's banged up, I can lead into it from more of a place of empathy. Like, hey, what's going on? Let's try to get you right. So I think there's a point where you get where it's easier to say whoa than sick 'em. You know what I mean? So it's for now we're kind of pulling guys back a little bit. Like, hey, let's today you're only going 30 pitches because you were barking a little bit yesterday. We want to take it easy on you. So I think you want to get your culture at a point where there is a little bit of internal pressure to perform. Now, what Dee described in the wrestling world, like there's sometimes I get concerned in the youth area where we'll have kids that won't play in a tournament in baseball because they have a showcase coming up a week later and they don't want to get hurt. And to me, that's the larger issue, that I think sometimes kids are getting robbed of experiences because they're chasing something bigger. Like winning a Big Ten championship to me is really, really special.
It should be.
And to think about not competing for that, like, yeah, you got something coming up in a week or two, but you're missing out on that. And the same thing in baseball, basketball, whatever. I'm like, gosh darn, like you're getting robbed of opportunities. You had a chance to win that tournament, and you're not going to do it because you want to go perform for these scouts in 2 weeks. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. So anyways, my mind goes in a bunch of different directions, but I would say off the main question, we're at a point now where I have to kind of pull guys in a touch and say, hey, why don't you just take a day off and rest? This can be better for you and for the team.
Mine is, I think, just like when you watch the NFL, right, and they'll be like, the guy's questionable. I think in some of the heavy lifting stuff, some guys are questionable. But when they go through their warm-up and they take a few weights, sometimes you end up having your best day.
That's right.
I've had some of my worst feeling days when I walked in here and walked out with a whole different experience, like where I made a PR, I felt amazing, and it put me on like a track of like, I just worked through that because John Bros, who taught me some of the Bulgarian stuff, like he said, the body fucking lies to you. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it's your mind. Sometimes it is your body. So I'm always like more from the vein of thought, like give it a go.
Yep.
Get your warm up in. That's not going to make you more hurt probably, right? Now the weight could make you more hurt.
But you'll know after the warm up.
Exactly. That's what I think. Yeah. So I think it's to walk in and just go, I'm out today. Todd, one of our, who's also a baseball coach, right? Todd Dunkel, he's got like some tendonitis in his arm. So sometimes his bench days, that dude goes through the warm up, figures it out, and some days he can go and some days he can't. Dude's 54 years old, still doing elite stuff. You know what I mean? There's a two-sport athlete at Capital. Like, he knows when he can go and when he can't go. And I know he's not going to just give in. You know what I mean? Once again, back to what's the expectation. But it's like if Todd comes to me and says, not today, I'm not going to go, you better fucking wrap it up and let's go. You know what I mean? But at least he was in the process to try to give it a go. And so that's the kind of thing, like I've came in here for a year trying to give it a go sometimes, and it wasn't a go. But now it's a go. You know what I mean?
I like that.
You know what I mean? So
and you almost have to earn that right? Like Todd Dunkel's earned the right.
Oh.
Like there's NFL, like there's a lot of times going off your point about can you practice or if not you won't play in the game. Like that usually happens like in the younger phase of the NFL guys, but there's a lot of veterans that don't practice on Thursdays and Fridays because they don't do that right away. They do that because they know their body, they know what's going on. They go through their warm up, and they know to perform best on Sunday they're going to need a breather. But that's earned. Like Todd Dunkel has earned the right for you. You will never question him whether he, because he wants to go. He comes in, does his warm up. He doesn't call in and say, "Hey, I ain't coming in today. My shoulder's bothering me."
Yeah, no.
He comes in, puts himself out there.
Because sometimes stuff. I've had days where I felt terrible and stuff turned on.
Yeah.
For no reason, and all of a sudden, I went and deadlift 550 and had no clue I was going to do it when I walked in that day. So it's like part of it is just the try. Like you do what you know you need to do, and it's there or it's not there.
Well, the flip side of that is like the boy who cried wolf, So when you got young athletes, they're not really proven yet, and if they always have some type of excuse, and you don't know when they do have something valid going on.
Yeah,
you're like, all right, do they just were they up late last night? They just really don't want to do anything today, or is it are they hurt? Are they injured? You can't tell.
So what's your approach there? Like on that type of athlete, like what's your conversation like?
I usually try to make them go at first, kind of similar to what you do. I make them warm up and we try the movement, because I always say, if you're hurt, then it'll hurt doing the movement
for sure, even
with a very light load. So, but if we don't try, then we don't know, unless it's something obviously something very obvious or whatever, or maybe I kind of give them alternatives. When I'm talking just about strength training, we're not talking about competing on the mat or even competing in powerlifting or anything like that. But when we're talking about training, I'd say like, oh, okay, well your back's hurting. Okay, so I'm going to give you this alternative workout to do. We're going to find a way to kind of work around it. And then if we get through that and it doesn't bother them, I know, okay, they're probably going to be good the next time.
Yeah.
But I never let someone just go sit on the wall or anything like that.
No. Or just not, like, once again, just give it a try, because it could just wake up. I mean, and I don't know. I think that there's a lot of like confidence that can come through that, because then the person might walk in being demoralized because they don't feel great. But then they could literally walk out feeling like a whole different person, which has happened to me a ton. And I mean, I'll tell you, like this last little situation I had, I kept coming in trying to give it a go. I didn't know if it was going to go again. but it did. And it is, you know what I mean?
Backbending.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's part of it. But that was a good topic. So
Had
we
it-
got, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say I had a I don't know why this popped into my head, but I remember we were doing like, I think it was last preseason here with my high school kids. We were doing like a mile run, like a test, you know. And one of the kids showed up and he had like his Sperry's on or whatever. He didn't have his running shoes on, and he kind of acted like, "Oh, I forgot. I can't run in these. I'll get shin splints." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I got a bike workout you're gonna do." Well, after that bike workout, he wished he would have brought his running
Yeah,
shoes. You know?
yeah.
So he thought he was being slick and trying to get out of the run, where in reality, what I made him do on the bike was worse. You know, so
You proved your point.
I proved my point, and I mean, it was still good for him, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily a punishment, but it's like, okay, well, just because you don't have the right equipment, we're not going to let you sit out today. You're going to do something that's even harder.
Yeah, sitting
You know?
out's really not an option
No,
unless you're
no.
actually injured.
Right. He wasn't injured. He's brought the wrong shoes.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, yeah, you don't give people that easy out, right?
No.
Like, yeah,
No.
we got an alternative plan.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't wrap it as punishment.
No.
You
It's
know,
it wasn't at all. It
I
was-
say, hey, this is going to be great.
There's
You know,
this is the true alternative.
true alternative. Exactly. Yeah.
Just put him in the dirt.
you,
Yeah.
you need to get your heart rate up, and we'll get it up here, right? Yeah.
That's funny.
I got a heavier one, and I don't. Well, we'll give it a shot. You know, it doesn't go. I'm trying to grapple with this idea of failure, and trying to flip around failure to make it a positive. So, and maybe I should have gave you some time to reflect on this one. But I'm interested.
We're
to hear,
pros here, Mike. We
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear if there's been a time in your life where you wanted something really bad and didn't get it, or a time you were rejected, or something negative happened. And in that moment, you felt like it was the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I got a gang of those, Mike.
But on the flip side, it was actually the best thing for you. And
Yeah.
and where I'm going with this is, you know, you can, you know, there's right now. This is springtime. Kids are getting cut from high school teams. There's a lot of negativity that's going on. But it could be the worst thing. Parents will say it's the worst thing ever. Like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's leading you to something else. So I'm just interested. I think it'd be really beneficial for coaches, parents, kids to hear about negative times that actually turned into be a positive.
Well, it's a little bit of a long-winded story, but I think it's right on top of this. So my dream of when I come here, you know, move to Columbus, start the gym, do whatever, you know, you figure 20 years ago, magazines is a big deal, right? And I wanted to be on the cover of a magazine in a bad way. I didn't want to be Mr. Olympia. I didn't want to be an elite cover model or elite, you know, power lifter. I wanted to be on the magazine. I wanted to go to the store and pick myself up. Now, at that time, drugs, well, they're always rampant in fitness, but like most of the dudes is like probably what, 220 and ripped up,
Jacked.
jacked all. And I'm $170, not as lean as them, you know, so it's not looking real promising. But I'm pushing. Every year we're at the Arnold. I'm going in. They would have booths at that point. You could go meet the magazines, the senior editors. Dude, I bothered the shit out of everybody. You know, bothered them, followed up. Like I'm that guy. Every year I'm coming back with new pictures. Like I'm pushing. So, you know, this dream starts like right when I move here because I ran into like an agent that kind of gave me like some ideas like that maybe. So I go to New York. I kind of do that thing. Well, anyway, so I'm pushing. So for 8 years, I'm pushing, man. And then in the 7th year of the 8th, so I made the goal at 8, but this is how it happened. I get the call. It's a month before Thanksgiving. And they're like, hey, we had somebody cancel out or something happened. Do you want to shoot the cover of Physical, which is the GNC magazine? So I'm thinking, this is before I'm in supplements, right? I'm thinking I'm going to be at every GNC. Like this is the one that sat there when you would check out right there. Physical magazine, me, Corey. Like this is great exposure, right? Have a cover, you know, have the story of me, whatever. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm in, but I'm in gain phase when they call me. So I'm not looking like I look pretty much all the time now, right? My diet strategy wasn't as good in about 2005. And so I'm like, but I have to take it because this is the shot, right? So I bust my ass. I'm eating turkey on Thanksgiving, like turkey salad on Thanksgiving. Like I'm not eating my grandma's pie, like I'm in. And I get pretty good. Definitely not A game, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give it hell. And then I do about 9 things wrong the last week. I didn't understand sodium. I had to fly to California. There's all these factors I didn't take into control, you know, and I just didn't know. I was so young. So, man, I jump on this plane. I ate the wrong thing the night before. I get there. I look like a marshmallow, like the water retention. Then I go and I'm nervous, so I go to this local gym and I do all this cardio. It makes me look worse. I finally get to the photo shoot, and when I walk in, it's LA. It's everybody's beautiful. You know, And I'm walking in. The guy who's taking the photos before me is the most elite cover model in the game. He's 190. He's shredded. The girls is hanging on him. He's killing it. He's on like 200 covers. Killing it. His name's Greg Plitt. He passed away about 5-6 years ago. And I'm walking in basically not like a GOAT level dude, but he's kind of there at that point. Like he's the guy.
He was the man.
He was
sure.
the man for
Yes.
sure. So I'm walking in like, I know I ain't looking like this dude. But this is the situation I've been dreaming about. And so it's so bad that I'm sitting, I'll never forget this. He's done with his shoot, crushes it. Sits down, he's talking to me, and he's like, oh, hey, man. He thought I was on the crew. And I'm in a tank top. I'm telling you, dude, it's bad. So I go like this. So I go, oh, no, I'm next. He's like, oh, okay. And then he flips it. He's not trying to be mean. He just didn't know. He'd never seen me before. I'm sitting there talking to some people we kind of each know. He thought I was on the fucking lighting crew. So then the guy who's taking the photos is this big time dude. His name's Corey also. He took for Muscle Tech and all these huge campaigns. He's like a big hitter between Hawaii and California. He's trying to light me. He's trying. But he knows, I know it's bad. I'm soft, bro. I mean, you can barely see my abs. He's trying to set me. Finally, about 10 minutes in, I know I just basically peed down my leg, right? Mm-hmm. I look at him, I said, hey, Corey, I said, I think we can just stop, bro. I know that this is not a representation of myself. I didn't have enough time. I didn't want to mess up the opportunity. I said, but here's the deal. I'm not going to waste your time anymore. If I call you and come back on my own dime, will you shoot me 6 months from now? However long it takes. He said, I was like, this is my dream. I know that it might not even equal into a cover shoot, but I just want an opportunity to shoot with a guy like you. And I'm telling you, I'm going to go home and go back to work. And he said, yeah, I'll do it. So I just cut the time that day, just, licked my wounds, got back on the plane, and I was demoralized because that was my dream. I was in my dream. I'm in LA. I'm at the cover shoot, everything.
And you blew it.
Bad.
Blew it.
Ultimate blew it. Like, the guy before me thinks I'm on the lighting crew blew it.
I'm mad at you right now.
Yeah. So, and this is like, even to get the nod is almost for my size and all my situation. I'm not in the big world, whatever. So I go home and I get to work, dude. And so every day when I'm getting in shape, like next level shape, I'm doing 200 ab wheels a day. And I'm thinking, when I go back, it's going to be hands down so nasty that when I take my shirt off for that first photo, he knows I'm going to be a fucking cover model. Mm-hmm. Like, that there's no way I'm not even close to a second, like, tier guy. Like, that when I walk in, it's like, oh, okay. And it's exactly what fucking happened. I called him 6 months later. I flew to LA. I gave myself time. I got there a couple days before. I learned from it. I walked in. I went to the bathroom. I remember he's like, yo, we'll do it. And off this background, I was like, yeah, let me take a leak real quick. I'll be back out. Came back out. He was doing something. I took off my shirt and I was like ready to hit the first pose. He was like, oh, that wasn't a representation of yourself, was it? I said, nah, it wasn't. But we're about to get it now. And then I just fucking blazed the whole photo shoot. Took about 6 months for the photo to end up coming out on the magazine, but that resulted in my first cover of a magazine. Walked in Barnes & Nobles and grabbed that bitch up. Took it straight to my granddad and said, here it is. And that right there was a year and a half. But dude, every day I was in this bitch, like, I needed that. I didn't want it to happen that way, but I needed it.
You never did.
But I could have went two ways. This is not for me. I'm not as big as these guys. I easily could have came home and just said, I gave it a try. I was in this little Cosmo thing. I just keep personal training in Ohio. But I was like, no.
I think most people in that situation would have felt overwhelmed by it and would have left feeling like, you know what? Maybe I didn't belong there.
Yeah.
I
didn't that day.
Right. And you didn't that day, but it gave you motivation to
did.
prove that you belonged. I think most people would have went the other way.
Yeah.
It probably happens a lot.
It could have.
They would have looked at it and said, you know what? Now seeing I'm not Greg Plitt. There's
Yeah.
a reason why I came close, but I never made it.
Maybe I should be on the lighting crew.
Right. Maybe I can get an internship
So
there.
I think sometimes, like, I haven't really told that story in a long time. Like, I realized, like, when I run into things, like, I've been through some crazy shit and came out on the other side, bro. In all these different, from business, from athletes, like, and so, like, when, one other good example, and then I'll hand it off, is the Squat Every Day stuff. That's really what propelled me into a different level of programming as a guy whose people's workouts, they thought I was nuts. Mm-hmm. But I only created it because I went to an event 6 hours away with Westside, and fucking bombed out. I didn't make one squat. I looked like I had a hard weight cut. Louis side. I'm living, once again, I'm in it, and I want to be there. And I look like I never fucking squatted before. And he called me 3 times, and I didn't get my opener. When you bomb out, that means you go sit in the crowd. You're done. I traveled 6 hours down there. Weight cut, was supposed to squat 700. I didn't even make 650. And I was, once again, I come home, and I'm like, I type in the fucking Google search. What happens if I fucking squat every day? That's literally what I typed in. And all of this stuff came up, and I said, boom, that's me. And that changed everything for me. So there's 2 things that were hugely historic in my career that, man, I was, once again, I probably don't belong here is what I thought. You know what I mean? But anyway, so there you go.
Anything else you guys want to share? Anything that jumps, like big one for you?
Lighting crew.
Yeah.
I would say the big one for me, career-wise, is I've been involved with Ohio State for a long time. I've been the coach at the Regional Training Center since 2012. Now, a lot of people don't really understand the dynamics of that. People just look at me as like the Ohio State guy. But even, at all those years when I was running the strength program for the Ohio State wrestling team, I was never employed by Ohio State. I was employed by the nonprofit, the Ohio Regional Training Center, which is the Olympic arm of the wrestling program down there. So now, I came in 2012. By 2014, I'm running the show. By 2018, we got 3 Big Ten titles. We got a national title. I feel like I'm untouchable. Well, there's some shakeups in the administration at Ohio State under the kind of the strength conditioning wing of the university, and there's this new administrator type that comes in that looks at me as a liability because they technically don't have control over me. I still kind of have to report to them. I got to stay on their good side, but at the end of the day, I'm held accountable.
It's like a loophole.
It's a loophole, exactly, that we utilize to great effect. So I'm really held accountable by the head coach, by Coach Ryan. So this person comes in, and now they decide, okay, well, we're going to make it into a full-time position employed by the university. So, hey, and if they tried to squeeze me a couple other times, at first it was like, hey, well, he doesn't have his CSCS, so I went and got my CSCS.
I remember that.
And this administrator, their first reaction to Coach Ryan said, oh, we didn't think he'd be able to pass that.
Yeah.
That's what they thought. They just thought I was like some meathead. No, I studied for it every day for 3 months, every day for hours.
They didn't know you was like academically as smart as you are.
Yeah, they just thought I was like some thug from Steubenville. You know what I mean? I might look and talk like one, but I can actually got some book smarts too. But anyway, so they try to squeeze me there. They try to squeeze me there. Then eventually they said, you know what? We're going to make this into a full-time position. So now at that point, if I want to continue training the college team, if I want to run the show down there, now I got to work for the university. Well, that sounds great. A lot of people might think, well, why didn't you do that? Okay, well, that's
pay cut.
You're a huge pay cut. You're basically working full time for the university. Now I can't promote my other businesses, Max Effort. I can't utilize my position as a university employee to profit. This is before NIL and all that stuff. So it was just really from the get-go, there's no way I could do it. So now there's got to be a hard cut. They're going to have to hire someone else. I'm not going to apply for the position. They're going to bring someone in full time. And now I'm on the outside looking in. I can still, train, call in these other guys that are postgraduate. But the guys on the team, they've only known me as their strength coach the whole time they've been there. The guys that are 50-year seniors, they've only known me. I've helped shape them. I've helped shape the culture. Now I'm on the outside looking in. And at the time, it felt like it felt like the girl you wanted to ask to prom won't even take your call. You know what I mean?
It's a letdown.
It was a huge letdown. And I can remember talking with Nettie G, and she was like, D, she's like, this hurts right now. She said, but it's going to be the best thing for your career long term.
Yep.
And so now, we're 3 or 4 years later, I've had so much more time to be able to build Max Effort, to be able to focus on training athletes, to be able to focus on content, be able to spend more time with my family because I'm not commuting back and forth to downtown Columbus. And I still am, involved on the peripheral with the program. I still train the Olympic guys. I still train the team in the summer. They still come out here. They just had me in as the honorary coach, a couple of dual meets ago or whatever. So I didn't really lose all the things that I felt like had been kind of tied to my identity. I thought it was going to be taken away because I'm not the guy anymore. You know what I mean? So it's turned out to be a positive thing. And but at the time, it felt heart-wrenching. It felt like everything I worked for was being taken away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you felt like you got Tanya Harding right to the knee, right, or whatever.
Oh yeah,
because that's how those situations feel. Like I felt like I basically was done because that was my shot and I missed it. But it's like but I think if I didn't have the confidence to know that that wasn't my time right there. I just need to get him to like give me another chance. But that's hard with a lot of people. You know what I mean? It's tough. So Tread.
Yeah, so mine is kind of how I ended up at Max Effort Muscle. So right out of college when we were for a small hospital, and the goal was to go work for, a big, medical company, because that's what my degree was in. So I get a job at a Fortune 15 company, like huge company, great. Start in like data entry and kind of work my way up, right? And I find a job that I really love, and I'm like at the supervisor level. I'm not really supervising people, but that's what like the levels they have. So my next step is then to become a manager, right? And I'm like, you can be like a people manager or project manager, and I'm like putting myself in that position to go like the project manager route, huge pay raise, 401k, all these benefits, everything, and they pull the rug out from me. They're like, yo, we found these people overseas that are going to do your job. And I was like, oh, so what do I do? And they're like, well, you're going to train them for 6 months, and then you're no longer needed.
Ouch.
And I'm like, okay, cool. So, we go through the 6 months, whatever, and I'm trying to find a way, just any way that I can stick with the company, because I'm like, this is what I've worked the past 5 years for. I'm trying to stay with this company so I can, get to that next level, because I want to be one of those high-level people at this company. So when we're going to these events or whatever, people are like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I tell them, like, oh, I'm this level at a Fortune 15 company, and people are like, oh, wow, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Because you kind of want that clout.
I don't even know any of this, and we hired him, so this is amazing. He shows my interview process a little different.
So I find a way. I kind of got put into a way to stay with the company, because they're like, we want to retain you in some capacity. So they keep me there, and I hate it. I was like, this is the worst thing.
They also showed their cards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's hard not to see.
So I saw the worst possible outcome. What I thought was the only outcome was, I want to stay with this company at all costs. I have to stay with them. This is my identity, everything. They put me in a different position, and I hated it. And it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And that's when Corey called me and was like, what's it going to take to get you to come? And so that's how I, was able to – that was honestly the best thing that's happened in my entire life, was Corey to call me and say, hey, I want you to be an employee of Max Effort Muscle. So what I thought was my trajectory turned out to the worst possible thing, where they cut my position and then put me in a position that I absolutely hated. It was the worst possible thing turned into the best
But now it's an
outcome.
opportunity where it's like a clean slate. Your position specifically is like you get a chance to build it out from here, right? So it's like it ain't no easy like Nerf hoop layup.
Yeah.
But there's an opportunity to be able to build something you're really proud of. I think that then, I mean, in my mind, that some corporate structure can't take away from you.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Where this is going is way bigger than what I ever now I'm ashamed to tell people that I even work there. Because it's like when I go to these events, it's like, oh, what do you do? Well, I work for Max Effort Muscle. Oh, wow. Like people are like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't even want to tell them about my past life where I was working in corporate America.
So when I hear these, I appreciate you guys your vulnerability to talk about that, because I think it's so important. People have the mindset of, why is this happening to me, instead of maybe, why is this happening for me? Like when that happens, right? Like
Quote that.
Yeah. I'll grab that.
Yeah, but think about that, D, right? Like it all goes away from you that day. Like, I'm no longer with Ohio State Wrestling. I'm no longer with this company. I missed the squat. Well, like, why is this? Why me? Like, why didn't I? Why? No, why? Like, no, this is actually could propel me. And I think it's how we take those negative moments in life and how we shape them. I think there's people look at us and they think there's nothing negative that ever happens. Oh. And I think that's so wrong. I mean, I think those moments are coming. Like, we're sitting 3-0 right now. And I told our guys, like, we would have practiced a lot different if we went 0-3 this weekend.
Facts.
You know what I mean? Like, so we got to flip our mind and go, we're 0. Like, if you're 0-3, you start working with a little bit of desperation, right? A little bit of hunger. You're 3-0. It sounds good at people like that, but it's actually could be a negative thing. So, anyways, I think the way we as parents shape conversations, we as coaches shape conversations. When something happens to somebody that's negative, it's almost, hey, it could be really bad, but maybe not. Maybe not getting that cover shoot. Maybe
it would have been too easy. Maybe.
Yeah, and what if you wouldn't have had that conversation and just taken it and left and never went back? That your whole trajectory changes.
Way different, bro.
So, anyways, it's a mindset shift.
Well, in that situation, when it then did work, propelled me because honestly, one of the main differences of probably why Arnold became my business partner is because I was on the cover of a current huge magazine when I had that meeting. It just showed that like I had real pop in what I do. Like that was such an important part of all of that like if I it's almost like I was sitting there when he's taking bad photos of me and I go, am I about to let this shit really go? Or am I really about this? Like, am I really going to separate myself? And I just made the decision. I said, man, just quit wasting your time.
So maybe,
but I just need another chance.
So maybe this week, fellas, as we're just meeting people and we hear these, someone's going to come to us with the situation where they get to that crossroad.
Yeah.
Like, do I go back to the cover shoot? Do I go cry and say like I'm done with Ohio State wrestling? Do I just go? Or maybe someone's going to come to us and we're going to go,
yeah,
hey, this is a big opportunity right in front of you right now. Like right now, how you decide to handle this is going to be a major moment in your life, and roll with it. Right?
Well, and I think that shows everything because, like, I knew I was willing to grit it out and do it because I know what I'm about. But it's like I think those are the separators. Mm-hmm. How bad do you really want it? Like E.T. always says, I don't just kind of want it.
Yeah. No doubt.
You know what you're signing up. I just don't kind of want to build a great thing here. We're going to build a great thing here. Come follow me or don't. I'm going there anyway. It's just a fact.
Good stuff, man. Good
So,
stuff.
Great.
Appreciate you guys.
That was killer, bro. All the way. Listen, share this with your friends, for God's sakes, right? God, this is an amazing show. All right, Coach's Clinic Podcast, brought to you by Max Ever Muscle. I'm your boy, Corey G, Mike Deegan, Tyler Treadway, Dustin Myers. Appreciate you guys. We out.